Hey everyone! So I realized I refer a lot to my oldest son, Ace, and his story and everything that happened with him because it was so life-altering for us. And when we walked through that, just our faith and just who we are grew so much because of what we walked through that I decided I really wanted to make a video just dedicated to Ace's story and doing its own video so that I can really go through some more details that I usually can't go through. So that's what this video is going to be about. So our oldest son is Ace, and I was pregnant with him in 2018, and it was a normal pregnancy, really nothing out of the ordinary. So as far as we knew, it was first kid, so seemed fine, and then at 34 weeks, my water broke, so we ended up in the hospital, and he came after about 30 hours of labor and then a C-section at the end. He was here. So when he was born, you could tell something was off. I used to be a labor and delivery nurse before I had him, and so you could tell the vibe in the room was a little different, and I didn't really hear a cry, heard little whimpers, but not really a big cry, which is what you expect to hear and want to hear from a newborn. So I knew something was going on, and then so my husband Matt, I had him go see what's happening, and so he went over and came back, and it's like, so what's going on? And concerned because I don't know what's going on, and so his response was, yeah, he has a lot of freckles. I'm like, well, what? So it turned out he was actually born with this rash all over his body, just like open, like kind of like big chicken pox, but open wounds around all over his body. And so he was also 34 weeks, so we knew he was going to be in the NICU anyway because he was early and would need some time to get his lungs developed and eating and all of that. That's what we were expecting, but this rash was unexpected, and so he gets whisked away to the NICU, and then we end up in our room, and then one of the docs, I can't really remember their title right now, but one of the docs came in and said, we want to transfer your baby because great NICU, they had everything except a pediatric dermatology, and so they gave my husband a list of 4 different hospitals, so I was pretty out of it coming out of the C-section, so they gave him a list of 4 different hospitals, and he ended up picking one in Cleveland, which was just God. God knew where we needed to be, and got us there. We really didn't really know what was coming, and that was the hospital we needed to be at. So Ace was about 6 hours old and ended up 2.5 hours down the road to Cleveland, and they were taking care of him there, and I'm back where we used to live, and just waiting to get discharged, waiting to be back on my feet and everything that happens after a C-section, after a delivery. And so I'm getting updates. So I get an update, transfer went well, I got there, and he seems about the same, he's doing well. Okay, sounds good. Still thinking, well, this is kind of a weird rash, but not a big deal. He's a 34-weeker. We might be here for a couple weeks. We'll see. So then I get, I can't remember how long I was in recovery before we left. I think it was about 2 days. And I'm getting these updates. They gave me a number to call so I could talk to the nurse, which was really awesome. And then I would get calls from the doc, and they would say, his breathing is really declining, and so we want to intubate him, put him on a ventilator. This is expected with a 34-weeker. We can manage his care a lot better if we can do that. So I said, yeah, of course, if he needs it. Okay. So he ends up ventilated, and then it's just every update that we got, he's just getting a little bit worse, and he's trying harder, and he needs more help, more of the ventilator doing the work than he is for himself. And so I'm like, something's going on. This is strange, but he's a preemie. We don't know what this rash is, so they're doing all the tests under the sun, trying to figure out what is this rash from, and everything's coming back negative, which, usually you want tests to come back negative, but when something's going on, you want an answer. so that you can, okay, we have diagnosis, and now we can figure out, okay, well, how do we help him? So they've got him on, broad spectrum medications, and so things seem under control, but his breathing is still not doing great. So it's kind of getting worse and worse, and then finally I get discharged and head over to Cleveland, and we, in order to go see him, because he has this rash, we don't know what's causing it, does he have an illness that we can catch? So we gown up, and this is pre-COVID, so this was not everyone needed a mask, but we needed a mask with him, and we needed a gown with him and gloves, and so we would go in and super sweaty because of the NICU. You got your room's pretty warm because there's little tiny babies, which is great, but when you've got stuff on, you're just sweating. So I have a high respect for just the medical people who are in the NICU all the time and not sweating, or they are sweating and just doing an awesome job. But so we go in there, and I'm super emotional because I just had a baby, but also our baby is just hooked up to all this stuff. It's just really overwhelming to see someone you love in the hospital, but hooked up to all this stuff, and you have to wear gloves, so I can't really feel the touch of his skin, and really mourning the loss of what I thought delivery was going to look like, but also super confused and just hormones all over the place. So it's a very emotional time. But a couple days go by, and the answers are still, we don't know where this rash is from, but it's getting better. And so finally they decide, the rash is pretty much gone, and so you really don't need to wear these protective things to protect yourself from him. Whatever it was, that's gone. He's still on the ventilator. His breathing is still not great. It's not getting any better, but you don't need to wear this stuff. So they told us that one morning, and then by that afternoon, a couple hours later, the immunologist comes in. Oh, okay. And sits down, and when the doctor sits down with you, and you just feel, well, this is serious. Something's going on, So I had that vibe in the room, and basically she tells us, your son doesn't really have an immune system. It goes through all of the technical pieces of it, and I'm trying to rack my medical schooling and trying to remember what these things mean, but also this is my baby you're talking about, and what does this mean? And so at the time, it's just what do we do? How do you have a kid with no immune system? The only thing I've heard, it was the bubble boy, and I was pretty sure that was just a movie, but that was a real thing that I found out later. But in retrospect, it did not happen. It did not click right away, but just seeing God protecting him. So at first he had this rash, and we thought, oh no, we don't want to catch that, whatever he's got going on, so we're putting all this stuff on. Well, now it's flipped, and now we find out he doesn't have an immune system. You need to wear a mask, wear gloves, wear this gown to protect him from all these germs. So before anyone even knew he didn't have an immune system, of course God knew, and he protected him with this rash. So was this rash just because he needed protection? Maybe. And is that worth it? Yeah, because it's this little baby without an immune system. And just these things along the way, almost every day, of God just protecting Ace, protecting us as we go through this NICU journey, which is something we never expected to be sitting in. Right? And so with this no immune system, there's these rooms called positive pressure rooms. And so basically it's when the door opens, there's air that's blowing out. And so it's just an extra protection of germs getting blown out. And so they only had a couple in the NICU because you don't really need them, only for specific issues. And so just so happened that the day that we found out we would need it, the kid who was in there was discharged and went home, and it was open, and so we could go in there. And so we did not even have a wait. We just ended up transferring over to this other room, exactly what he needed. God took care of him again, and decided, well, his lungs are still the same and, kind of declining. So what's going on? Let's get a CT, which is more than just, they had done other tests like the chest x-ray and that kind of thing, because you could bring that into the room. The CT is pack them up, you're headed to a different part of the hospital. So not so easy. So they decided we're moving him different rooms anyway. Let's bring him down, get a CT, bring him to this new room. So they ended up doing that, and little did we know this was going to be the last chance to do that. The last time that he was stable enough to get a look at his lungs through the CT, because at the time it just looked blurry on the chest x-rays. Can't really see what's going on. Something's going on, seems strange, not getting any better. So he goes down for the CT. We're trying to wrap our minds around having a kid without an immune system. What does this look like? He ended up getting something called IVIG, which is like a pseudo-immune system every couple of weeks. It didn't last. That's why you would have to get it every couple of weeks, and then they checked his levels when he got it, and to see how high they were, and then right before he got the next one to see did he do anything with it, did it go away, and most of the time, all the time up to there, it was not lasting. So he needed to keep getting these infusions, and so we're wrapping our head around this. They're going to do all of this genetic testing, just trying to figure out what's going on, get a better diagnosis so we can help him better. So he goes down for his CT, comes back, and gets settled, which takes a lot to settle a little NICU baby into a new room. And then the doctor that had him came and asked me to step out, and which is what was kind of typical, because you don't want to add extra germs into the room that you didn't need to. So I didn't think too much of it. She wanted to show me the CT, and so okay. So I came out, and she's showing me, and your lung tissue, when it should be healthy, right? And his looked like when a kid has like a bubble pipe and blows into it, and it's like all these tiny little bubbles, foaming out and over it. That's what his entire lungs looked like, which is not what it should look like. And so, as I'm sitting there and she's talking about it, the seriousness of the situation is setting in. And, it didn't hit me all at once, but then as she keeps talking, we finally get to the point where she says, I'm sorry, this is not compatible with life. And, we don't know what this is. We're going to call it cystic lung disease, but we don't know, are they filled with pus? Are they filled with fluid? Are they just empty cysts? Whatever it is, it's causing him to not be able to to breathe on his own. And so the ventilator is doing all this work. So when you hear the words not compatible with life, I don't know, maybe everyone has a different reaction, but my first reaction was, one, God, what are you doing? What are you doing? And then two, at that point it was just me there, and I needed to go relay this information to my husband that what I just heard about our son, which remains the hardest day of my life, I think. Yes, for sure. And so, I relay that to my husband, Matt, and, we just cry and sob and pray, and what are we supposed to do now, God? And the next day go back, and another doctor comes in and sits down and has that talk of, there's nothing more we can do. We're just sustaining right now, but they switched him over to a different kind of ventilator called an oscillator, and so up to now we could not hold him, and then they switched him onto the oscillator to see, will this help? But really not a lot of hope. And just really being in the state of shock and not sure, how do you, every night saying good night to your baby, but also saying goodbye, but not saying goodbye. It's just hard. And if you have had a loved one with a situation like this, or any kind of similar situation, medical situation, where you don't know what's going on, but it's not good, and it's not a matter of if, but when this really turns really bad. And so we were in that state. So that was he was 10 days old when we heard there's nothing more we can do. And so at that point, we were told, a lot of nights, this looks like it's the night, the things that he's not going to make it through the night, or he had a really hard day, looks like this is probably the end, and you don't know what you can get through until you have to get through it. And that is the only explanation for us to still have survived through this, that God literally carried us through this, and so 10 days old, we heard he's not going to make it. Every night we're saying goodbye, feeling torn. Do I stay at his bedside forever? Do I go get rest because I can't even keep my eyes open today? What do you do? And and there's no right and wrong. If you are in a situation like this, I spent a lot of time feeling guilty that I went and took a nap, or that we ended up staying at a Ronald McDonald home, which was super, super, such a blessing, because there's no way we could afford it to do anything else. And it was just down the street, and you can't feel guilty for how you are getting through something so tough, and so anyway, so that was 10 days old. Over the next 2 months, Ace holds on, and it's this roller coaster, the roller coaster of the NICU of, I would have a really hard time when someone would text me, how's today going? Like, well, right now it's going good because of da-da-da. If you text me in an hour, it's probably going bad because this happened. And, it's just this up and down and up and down, and he's not even really taking steps forward. The beginning of January, he seemed to be doing a little better. We could wean him off of the ventilator a little bit. And then, the next week, either he got sick or something happened, and he's actually way worse. And, it's just back and forth, and there's still not a lot of hope, but there's also this, what's going on? And we believe in God. We believe, God is still good no matter what, but we truthfully felt like God was saying, I've got this, trust me. And so we did. Some nights trust looked like sleeping well, and some nights trust looked like yelling and crying into my pillow and asking God, why? What are you doing this? What is happening right now? And so we finally we got to hold him for the first time. We got to hold him right when he was born, and then we got to hold him again when he was about a month and a half old, and then things went south again, and he went back on the oscillator, where this is a different kind of ventilator where you can't hold the baby when they're on that. So just this time of wrestling with God, God, you are good on the good days, and what do we do with the bad days? You are still good, but man, I need you to help me through this. And so, finally, what ended up happening is, we tried all these different things. Steroids seemed to help for a little bit, and then that kind of stopped, just like a lot of things. His liver, he was so yellow, his liver was just shutting down, and he still doesn't have an immune system, but we're doing all you can there with the infusions. And so we ended up, end of February, it ended up being the very last thing we can try is a lung transplant, and which is a big deal, right? it has so many things with it. We needed to go to St. Louis, which was a 10-hour drive. The likelihood of him making it through that drive was really unknown. We could not fly because didn't know what different changes in pressure was going to do to the cysts in his lungs. And so that was out. And so they said, this is not a great chance of life, but it's the only thing left that we have. It's truly either you do this lung transplant or we go on comfort care and just wait for him to pass, really. And so that is such a heavy, sitting around a table, and there are all the doctors that have worked with us, and they've been awesome in communicating, and you can tell they truly love our son too, right? And so they want the best for him, and this is heartbreaking, and these kind of meetings, no one likes them, right? But they gotta happen because these things, this is real. There's pain in this world, and sometimes we walk through it. And so this is what I want to share with you. Really is, we go home to our Ronald McDonald room, and we got to pray. What's our decision? Do we do this? Do we chance this lung transplant to maybe this helps with life for our son? And even then, if he gets new lungs, does his body, whatever's going on, since we still don't really have a diagnosis of what's going on, do these lungs just turn into the same cystic mess as the other ones? We don't know. We don't know what happens. But also, or do we just say no and knowing that that's it? There's nothing else to do. So we can't make that kind of decision on our own, right? I'm so thankful to have the hope of Christ to lean on and to carry us through situations like this. Without him, we would have just completely fallen apart. And so what I want to share with you is, we're making this decision, and God just brings this story of when the Israelites need to cross the Jordan River. And so little background if you don't know. So this is right after Moses died, and so after Moses died, he was the leader of the Israelites, the famous, they were slaves in Egypt, and then parting the Red Sea, God used Moses in that, and they're going through the wilderness. And so there's this promised land that God has said, I'm taking you out of slavery, and I have this promised land for you to live in. You got to get there. And so Moses dies, and Joshua takes over. And so this is his first, he's taking over, and this is his first thing that God's really having him do as the new leader. They've come up to the Jordan River, and this river is standing between them and their promised land. And, this is not just a swim across the river, right? And so Joshua seeks God, and God gives him instructions in how to cross this river, how to get through, and that's what I want to read. And so this is going to be Joshua 3. If you want to read the whole story, it starts really Joshua 1 and reading through. But for the sake of time, we're going to start Joshua chapter 3, verse 7. The Lord said to Joshua, "Today I will begin to exalt you in the sight of all Israel, that they may know that as I was with Moses, so I will be with you. And as for you, command the priests who bear the ark of the covenant, when you come to the brink of the waters of the Jordan, you shall stand still in the Jordan." And Joshua said to the people of Israel, "Come here and listen to the words of the Lord your God." And Joshua said, "Here is how you shall know that the living God is among you, and that he will without fail drive out from before you the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Hivites, the Perizzites, the Girgashites, the Amorites, and the Jebusites. Behold, the ark of the covenant of the Lord of all the earth is passing over before you into the Jordan. Now therefore take 12 men from the tribes of Israel, from each tribe a man. And when the soles of the feet of the priests bearing the ark of the Lord of all the earth, shall rest in the waters of the Jordan, the waters of the Jordan shall be cut off from flowing, and the waters coming down from above shall stand in one heap. Verse 14. So when the people set out from their tents to pass over the Jordan with the priests, bearing the ark of the covenant before the people, and as soon as those bearing the ark had come as far as the Jordan, and the feet of the priests bearing the ark were dipped in the brink of the water, now the Jordan overflows all its banks throughout the time of the harvest. The waters coming down from above stood and rose up in a heap very far away at Adam, the city that is beside Zarethan, and those flowing down toward the sea of the Arabah, the salt sea, were completely cut off, and the people passed over opposite Jericho. Now the priests bearing the ark of the covenant of the Lord stood firmly on dry ground in the midst of the Jordan, and all Israel was passing over on dry ground until all the nation finished passing over the Jordan. So this is the passage that God really gave me when we're trying to make this decision. It was not what it was, more a decision between, more than this decision between a lung transplant and comfort care. What are we supposed to do? It was, God, what do we do? But deeper than that, it was, God, can we trust you? When you tell us what to do, can we do that and lean into you and trust you? And so, reading this, we can quickly read in verse 16, that says that the waters were cut off and then the people passed over opposite Jericho. Now, they had already heard of and lived through the Red Sea, right? Where Moses puts his staff up and God parts the Red Sea before their eyes and they walk through. And so that is not the story here. The story here is that God did do it, but he cut off the waters way up in a different city. And so eventually the waters parted, but it was not an immediate thing that they got to see. They needed to stand in the water and wait. And so this question I felt like God was asking me was, at that point we knew we were supposed to say no to the lung transplant. I'd say yes to comfort care, but not saying yes to, this is the end for Ace, and saying goodbye, but saying, God, he is completely in your hands, and we fully believe you will heal him and he will live. And we had this picture of we were standing in these waters of, God, do something, heal our son. And, you put your feet in the water, confident and full of faith. The longer you're standing in the water and not seeing that water part so that you can walk through, the shakier you can get. And there's this question, that I felt God was saying, where does your faith stand? Do you trust me because you can see me doing stuff with your own eyes? Or can you trust that I am faithful, that I am good, and that I am working even though you don't see it? When you're looking in your situation, it seems to be remaining the same. Can you still trust that God has you, that he has the best for you, that he takes care of you? And not necessarily trust that what you want to happen is going to happen, but can you trust that God is good and he has a good plan for you? This was the water that we're standing in. We had this moment of, I'm standing in the water and I'm not seeing these waters move and for a long time, and things are, it's not just waiting in the water. Things are getting more and more desperate. We need to see you move, God. And now we got to make this decision. Are we going to stand planted in the water and trust, God's going to do something and we're not moving? Our faith is not moving. We believe in you, God. We know you are good, and this is where we stand. Or are we deciding to climb out of the water and essentially, deciding that, God, I don't think you have what's best for me. So what we ended up doing through that, knowing, God made it very clear we were supposed to say no to this lung transplant. And so February 28th, we said no to the lung transplant. And so he was switched on to comfort care. Nothing really changed other than mindsets, really, because there was nothing else to do. It wasn't like we were doing anything, really. We didn't not turn off life support. We didn't do that. So he's on comfort care. And so that was February 28th. We said no. We said, okay, God, we're standing in this water, and here he is. And just a complete miracle. The next day, March 1st, Ace breathes over the ventilator on his own. He has not done this in months. And so, if you see the screen of a ventilator, at that point he was taken off the oscillator and went back onto a conventional ventilator. And, the whole time you're just seeing ventilators doing everything. He's doing nothing, really. And then we look over, and one of the ventilators starts beeping. And they're like, oh, okay, something's going wrong. Okay, and that's just what happens. The roller coaster of NICU, it's also equipment. So, like his pulse ox is beeping all the time because it's reading 65, and so these alarms are not unknown to us, they're not really bothering us, but this alarm was different. And, I was in denial. Matt looked over and it's like, he's breathing over the vent. Did you see that? And I'm like, oh, babe, don't go there. Don't get your heart set on that. This is just equipment. It probably a hiccup, something weird. Well, then the ventilator's making these noises, and so it's not like an alarm, but they're just making these noises, and so the RT comes in and is checking, like, I don't know, this is kind of strange. So they actually end up switching the vent, thinking something weird's going on. Well, this one's doing the same thing, and so they end up concluding that Ace, every so often is taking a breath on his own over the ventilator. And so, everyone's kind of in shock because this has been a long journey of this kid's just not getting better. He's just on life support. And then all of a sudden, just like God does at a timing that it has to be God doing it, he starts breathing over the vent. And so, it's not an immediate healing, that's what I had always been praying for. It's just all of a sudden, boom, he's better. But over the next couple weeks, he's getting better. He's breathing over the ventilator. Pretty soon we can change some settings. So it's more and more of him doing the work than the machine. And by March 20th, he's extubated and the tube's out and he's on high flow oxygen. And, that was such a big day sitting there when he was extubated, and so many of the staff came to see it, and it just helped me see you don't make a connection with the people around you if you're only there for a day or two, like we had been praying. Right? God is working in the lives of everyone around us, working in the hearts of people just bent towards Ace. And now here we are sitting here seeing this miracle of this tube coming out, where we thought this tube was not coming out until he had passed, and that's the only way it comes out. But no, God moves and God heals, and he ended up being extubated, and it was not a straight road to recovery. We had a couple weeks of awesome, and now I'm used to getting to hold him and just having to worry about the oxygen cord, all the cords and the monitors that he's hooked up to. But until then, the only way we could hold him was very specifically because you've got the ventilator taped onto you, and so now I'm used to putting him on my shoulder and doing things that you do with a baby usually. And so he he ends up a couple weeks, we got used to that, and then he gets some kind of virus in April, and it just shoots him way back. His heart stops a couple times. They end up re-intubating for a week. If you're ever in the NICU, if you're ever in a medical situation, you just know it is up and down and this roller coaster of, oh, we're doing better this day. No, okay, we're doing way worse than I thought. This is not what I thought was going to happen. And really in that time was a lot of wrestling and God chiseling my heart. And do you trust me? Am I good? No matter what you see, you're standing in these waters. Are you planted in the faith of trusting in me, whether you see the waters part and the dry ground for you to walk through, or you just still see the waves and the flooding of the banks at this point, right? So we eventually, a couple weeks later, we end up, it's like end of May, he ends up going to the step-down unit, and at 6.5 months old, he gets to go home from the NICU, and so amazing, such a praise. And at the same time, there's this peace in my heart of, God, this is not what I asked for. I was very thankful that Ace could come home, but we had to take classes for his feeding tube, his NG tube, and classes for how to care for his being on oxygen and oxygen dependent. And then he also needs to have IVIG, so these infusions, because his immune system remained the same. It still was not there, and we're taking this baby home without an immune system, and that's scary in itself. And so just this wrestling of, this is not what I thought, God. This is, I was praying for complete healing, and I saw that as one day he is fine and we go home and this is a story we get to tell people. No, most of our weeks were filled with trips back and forth. At the time, we lived about 2.5 hours away from this hospital in Cleveland, so we're going back and forth to doctors in Cleveland to do scans, to do blood work, to do he's got IVIG infusions every 3 weeks that we got to go to the infusion center for, and then we've also got people coming into our home. Nursing comes into our home, physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy, feeding therapy, all things that he needed, all things that were a blessing, and we're so thankful for. But then at the same time, this wrestling of, God, I just wanted things to go back to normal. We never had normal with him, but this time of like, we just want to be home with our baby and things to be what we thought they were going to be. And I think we do that with all the trials that we go through, the hard times that we have to walk through, right? In this life, there's going to be pain, there's going to be trials, there's going to be hard times, and this is a fallen world. And so and God and Jesus never promised a follow me and you'll have an easy life. In reality, it's harder. But you have this hope of Christ to walk through life with. And I realize I too quickly want to just rush back to normal when God wants to put purpose to my pain that I just walked through. And so what we were seeing is, we have all these appointments, and it's taking up every ounce of energy and every piece of time that we have. But every appointment, every encounter with someone else was a chance to talk to them about, a lot of them knew Ace's story, some of them did not. So, sharing with them, this is his story, this is how God carried us through, this is how he's still carrying us through, and just sharing the hope of Christ. And so I just want to encourage you, if you have gone through something painful, are going through something painful, it hurts, and it's gonna hurt, and you'll have wounds and scars that you still have, and you probably still carry like we do. But don't let just the bitterness and the forcing to quickly get back to normal try to erase that of everything you've been through. God can use everything you've been through. He puts purpose to our pain in a way that is so healing. And just would I go back, and if I could choose, go walk through this again? I don't think so. That's what trials are. They're things that you would never choose, but that you have been chosen to walk through. And so trusting that God is good, trusting that He will use it. There are situations that we have been able to share Ace's story, and it has encouraged people. It has challenged people in the way that they thought about God, and it's completely changed and altered our lives. And so I just want to encourage you, if you're holding so tightly to trying to get back to normal, to trying to get back to how things were, and that is just not the place that you are right now, can you let go? Can you stand in the waters of the Jordan, not seeing much change, but trusting that God's going to do something? And maybe that's not fixing your situation. Maybe what that looks like is using your situation to reach others, to encourage others, to help others who are also going through that situation in a way that you would never understand what they're going through, but now you're walking through it, and you know how you can pray for them. You know exactly how you can help them, what they need, how you can come alongside them. Will you choose to let God put purpose to your pain, into your trials that you've walked through? Today, Ace is 6, and he is full of energy. I don't know. It is so amazing to me, because when we were in the NICU, you don't expect this kid to live, so you don't really picture him growing up. And if you do picture him growing up, you don't picture him thriving, and he just is. We still have things we walk through, certain things physically that we walk through with him, and with developmental stuff that when you grow up in the NICU for the first 6 months, you take a hit to a lot of developmental things. And so he's still working through that, but he is just the kindest boy. And something awesome? He's so young. He's only 6, but his main thing lately has been that he's been speech delayed. And so getting his emotions across, his ideas across, what he's trying to say has been really difficult. And so that has been a big thing for us, is working with him with that. But he's gone to school, and that has been so helpful. He has so many people on his team that have been helpful. But he is aware. We can notice when we're in a room and there is a kid who's maybe shy and often alone, or trying to say something and no one's listening to him. He is zeroed in on that kid. And can he really help them? I'm not sure. But what he can do is he can go over and make them feel valued. And he does. And he does that. I have to believe it has to be because he knows what that feels like, that he notices these kids in the room and he goes after them. And it is so amazing and so young and so challenging for me to, this was the very best life that he could be living. And that's what God's given him. And he is using it. And he is such a blessing to other people that it just is amazing. You think that you know what's best for your child, and then when that doesn't happen, you just feel helpless and hopeless. And you can put your hope in Christ and put your hope in that God has you, and that he has good plans for you, and that he is good. And we just see that in Ace. So that's Ace's story, and hopefully that puts some pieces together when I mention him, probably often in the other videos. And so I just hope if you've gone through something similar, or we all go through painful things that have altered us, and it's just an honor to be able to share this side of the story with everybody. And so that's what we're doing. Until next time.